Is Georgia safety Malachi Starks really in play for the Bills at number 30 overall? Should he be? What should the Bills do? I'm sharing my final thoughts today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. Well, folks, welcome in. It's time for my final thoughts. I want to go on a journey here with you, just really giving you every last thought that I have about the Bills and this 2025 NFL draft. I want to get into the plan at 30, and I've spent some time really thinking about this, and I have a landing spot for what I think the Bills will do predictively. Also, there's been a lot of connecting of Malachi Starks to the Bills at pick 30, so I want to share my thoughts on that possibility, get into the Bills' day 2 strategy, and I have a checklist for Brandon Beane on day 3. We're going to break that all down here today. Now, listen, this is the last episode of Locked On Bills prior to the 2025 NFL Draft. But we do have Bills Squad. Don't forget about Bills Squad. It's every Monday and Thursday. It airs live on YouTube at noon Eastern time. And so that'll happen Thursday at noon Eastern time. Myself, Jeremy White, Jerry Ostrowski, we're going to get into all of the final conversation points ahead of the draft. And so join us live. If you can't join us live, it'll be available, of course, to watch on YouTube or in the audio feeds shortly after we get done. So one more conversation on the feed, but this is the last episode of the traditional 30-minute Locked On Bills. Okay, let's do it. Let me tell you what I think about pick 30 and what the Bills are going to do. And I have been wrestling with this all week long. And for most of the week, I'd convinced myself that it was going to be a cornerback, and that cornerback being Trey Amos out of Ole Miss. Be a pick I'd like a ton. I like Trey Amos, good football player. I have a first-round grade on him. I think he fits the prototype that the Bills like at corner. You'd feel good about him and the skill set. It would be a good selection, and it still could be. I think it's very much in play, but I kind of talked myself out of it. And there's a number of reasons, partly because of the way that Brandon Beane talked about Trey White and Dane Jackson. I think the Bills brought back Trey White with the hope that he's going to start. And if you draft a corner in the first round and he doesn't start, I mean, you're going to have a reserve corner behind Trey White and Christian Benford all season long, assuming they're healthy. They feel good about Dane Jackson. Brandon Beane said he can sit there and talk for an hour about Trey White and Dane Jackson. I'm not saying that should be the plan. I'm just telling you predictively what I think. And so I think there is a level of hope, maybe even expectation, that Trey White is going to be the guy across from Christian Benford. I mean, Brandon Beane's talking about Peanut Tillman and drawing parallels between Trey White coming into Buffalo and the 2015 Panthers team when they signed Charles Tillman. They went to the Super Bowl. I mean, Trey White's 4 years younger than Charles Tillman when that happened. And so I just think it'd be kind of strange. And I think the Bills will pick a corner. I think they'll pick a corner early. But I'm becoming less convinced that it's the path they're going to take in the first round. So that's part of my reasoning. The other part of my reasoning is anytime you've ever listened to Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott discuss team building, they always talk about the trenches and how they want to be good up front and how everything starts up front. And when I look at this defensive tackle situation, it's not good enough. If the Bills had to play a game right now, and it's the first 6 weeks of the season without Larry Ogunjobi, your D-tackle rotation is Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones as your starters, with Zion Logue and Dwayne Carter as the backups. I'm not comfortable going to war with that. And I don't think the Bills are either, and they shouldn't be, especially at nose tackle, where Daquan Jones, entering the last year of his deal, you need someone to pair with him. I mean, Daquan's going to play 45 to 55% of the snaps. You need someone else that's going to play a lot of snaps. And I just feel like this is the angle that they're going. You have a need now and in the future. Brandon Beane said, we probably have more needs on defense. We're always looking for depth on both sides. And you also have to look at contracts down the road, guys with 1 year left. Well, Daquan Jones, 1 year left, aging player, approaching his mid-30s, showed some decline last year. So you have a need right now for someone to pair with him, and you have a need for someone to succeed him. Also, Brandon Beane talked about Dwayne Carter and how he's on standby as to whether he's going to primarily be a nose tackle or a 3-tech this year. I just feel like those factors push me into believing that this first pick is going to be a D-tackle. And the player I predict it's going to be, and you probably have seen my final mock draft by now, is Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. Upside, can really fit this role. They might ask him to drop a little weight. But that's where I'm landing on this. Could I be wrong? Of course. Of course I could be wrong about this. But as I just thought more and more about it throughout the course of the week, I talked myself out of the corner. I talked myself into the defensive tackle. And again, I could be wrong. But I think my process for arriving at the conclusion is something I'm comfortable with. And honestly, that's all I ever really care about was my process good to arrive to the conclusion that I got to? And then we'll see what happens. Now, again, I'd love Kenneth Grant. That'd be a player that terrific for me. He's number 15 player on my board. I mean, I have Trey Amos as a top 25 player on my board. These are guys that I like. And I think that's the last thing I want to say in this opening segment. I can't wait to talk about this Malachi Starks thing on the other side of this. But there are so many different ways that this could go that I'd be satisfied. There's not one or two or three or five players that the Bills have to pick one of those, and that's the only way I could be happy. I'm going to study this class. I know I've studied the Bills. There's so many different ways that I think they could go to help this football team. And so while this is probably my favorite path, it's not the only path that would make me happy. But I just look at this defensive tackle situation. It really underwhelms me, especially when you forecast this down the road. And I don't think you want to live in this world where you're perpetually concerned about your options. And I think Kenneth Grant would be a great option. I think Derek Harmon would be a great option. I like Walter Nolan. I don't know if the Bills would like Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss, but I do. So there's other ways to do this. There's good players on day two. Josh Farmer, Tyleik Williams, Alfred Collins. Very attractive options. There's day three options I like. Jamari Caldwell, CJ West. There's a lot of ways to do this. But my favorite path is Kenneth Grant in the first round. And predictively, I've at least talked myself into it. Whether I'm right or wrong, we'll find out. But that's my logic behind me predictively thinking that the Bills are going to go D-tackle, and in particular, Kenneth Grant in the first round. Now, a hot name, Malachi Starks. Feels like a lot of big names are mocking him to the Bills. We'll talk about that possibility here on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with me. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just another budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. The insights are surprising. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery, and now I budget smarter and I save more. The convenience is awesome. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan for the long-term goals. And it's easy to collaborate. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it easy and fast to get playoff tickets, even when the demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Here's why I love using Game Time. It's the last-minute deals. You can save 60%, up to 60%, on buying last-minute tickets for sports, comedy, theater events, music, whatever you want to get into. You can get a great deal on those last-minute tickets. Plus, the all-in pricing means there's no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, folks. On Wednesday, the day before the draft, everybody puts out their final mock draft, their final predictive mock draft. And you're starting to look at these things on Wednesday, and you see Dane Brugler, you see Benjamin Albright, you see Peter Schrager, and they all have the Bills picking one guy, Malachi Starks, safety, Georgia. And so what do I think about that? Well, I have a lot of thoughts. I'm going to share them with you right now. I like Malachi Starks a ton. He's a good football player, a true first-round grade for me, number 18 player on my overall board. He'd be well worth the pick. Like in a vacuum, very good selection. Good football player. Profiles well as a one-high safety that can play in the nickel, can play in man coverage. His ball skills are just unbelievable. He could take away the football. And so in terms of value, I have zero concerns. And I like Malachi Starks a ton. And I know there's some dot connecting between the Bills corners coach, Jamil Adai, coached him at Georgia. There's some familiarity there. I understand why there's dot connecting there. The holdup for me. The holdup for me is I think the Bills have bigger needs. Now, perhaps I've underestimated the importance of the safety position for the Bills. And I've overestimated how comfortable they are with the options. We certainly came out of an unbelievable run at the safety position between Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. And if you bring in Malachi Starks, I think you have a player that complements Cole Bishop extremely well. When you think about the skill set that Cole Bishop has, which I think is best for playing down closer to the line of scrimmage, tackling, man coverage against tight ends. He's better as that more traditional strong safety, low safety. Where Malachi Starks, play him on the roof, high post safety, range, ball skills, can allow you to play middle of the field close coverages, play in the slot and go man to man. Like he can do a lot. He's a good player. There's no doubt he's a good player. So all of that's really exciting. All of that I can get on board with. And again, if you want to get into the BPA, best player available argument, be a strong case. Be a real strong case that Malachi Starks is the best player when you think about what the real options will be at pick 30. Where I struggle with this is I think the Bills have bigger needs. I don't necessarily agree that the utilization of the resource, pick 30, is the optimal way to use that resource to improve the football team. I would want to improve the defense in other areas. I have a lot of confidence in the Bills' ability to coach up and find safeties. I don't feel like the best asset that you have in this draft needs to be used on it. What does this mean for Taylor Rapp? Has everything been a lie that you love this guy? Are they concerned about the durability? I mean, back-to-back years, MIA when you needed him most. Is that just something they're not comfortable with? Certainly there's a lot of athleticism that Malachi Starks has that Taylor Rapp doesn't. That's helpful. Taylor Rapp, I think, I think he saved the Bills. He saved the Bills defense so many times last year with clutch tackles and made some bigger plays. But if the Bills really feel like, hey, we need to have this next really dynamic, high upside pair of safeties in Malachi Starks and Cole Bishop, and this is the key to unlocking everything we need to do defensively, okay. I think what would be tough is, the Bills pick Malachi Starks at number 30. We got to go to bed and wake up the next day and live through however much time it is between when you wake up and day 2 starts, and the Bills use their top pick, and you're not any closer to helping yourself on the D line or at corner. So that's kind of where it gets tough for me. So I'd want to see what the whole picture looks like. Okay, Malachi Starks is the Bills' first round pick. Okay, I need to know more. Who would they get in the second round? What do they do with the rest of the picks? Because for me, what pushes me off the idea of Malachi Starks isn't that I don't like Malachi Starks. I love Malachi Starks. It's that I'm concerned about other stuff way more. But if you come out of this draft and Malachi Starks is the first pick, but then you tell me on day 2, the Bills wind up getting a Nick Scorton or a Landon Jackson or a Olu Oluwafemi or a Josh Farmer or a Tyleek Williams. You pair all those other D-line prospects that I like together, get a couple of those. Okay. All right. I'm down with it. I got to see the whole picture. So there's a world where this could make sense. Again, processing and dealing with it in real time is going to be tough. But if we get through this event and the Bills do get answers that I like for D tackle and D end and corner, then that's going to be like, oh, wow, I can't believe they did all of that and got Malachi Starks. Now, they got to do that. But that's just my high-level thoughts as we consider this possibility as the draft is fast approaching. I want to get into a little bit of a cornerback conversation because, I talked in segment 1 about how I've moved off of thinking that's what the Bills are going to do in the first round, and I think it's going to be trenches, and now we got to live with this Malachi Starks possibility. So when do the Bills pick a corner? If they do go Malachi Starks, they do go Kenneth Grant in the first round. Well, it goes back to one of the main talking points that I had when they initially signed Tre'Davious White, even before we heard from Brandon Beane and even before we heard from Tre'Davious White. It was, well, maybe this increases their appetite to take a bit of a risk at the corner position, whether that's Savone Revel coming off of an ACL tear, Darian Porter, limited starting experience but a high ceiling, Azareye'h Thomas out of Florida State, going to be 20 years old when he's drafted. Maybe you think he needs a little time to season. Benjamin Morrison, Notre Dame, injuries there. And maybe they're comfortable with the depth at corner. Maybe they are. Maybe they, not necessarily that the Bills have, but the draft and what it presents. Maybe they think to themselves, give me Noel Williams in a trade up in the 3rd round. Give me Dorian Strong in the 4th round. So I'm curious to see how they attack it, but I think they have a level of comfort in what Trey White and Dane Jackson can give them. And that's pretty fascinating to me. So I think the corner is going to happen at some point. But I think all of the things that they've done to this point has set them up to not feel like it has to happen in the first round. And there is the whole playability piece, right? If you do draft that corner in the first round and they don't beat out Trey White, now you got a backup corner with your first pick. You draft Kenneth Grant, that guy's playing 40% of the snaps all year long. and you're probably going to start in 2026. You draft Malachi Starks, that guy better start. And which is interesting because Brandon Beane has said recently that it would be hard for a rookie safety to come in and start for this defense. Maybe Malachi Starks is different. I mean, watch him play. He's got unbelievable instincts. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what I think about as it relates to this Malachi Starks possibility, why I'm thinking defensive tackle is firmly in play, and why I think the Bills might wait on corner. Some new thoughts, some new final thoughts that I have as the minutes tick away before the 2025 NFL draft. All right, on the other side of it, I want to talk a little bit more about day 2 strategy and my checklist for Brandon Beane on day 3. We'll do that here next, folks. Be sure to stick with me. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. LinkedIn's new feature can actually help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to get those qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say that LinkedIn helps them find high-quality hires. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, I want to talk more day 2, day 3 stuff right now, but also want to remind you, I am doing a live stream covering the 2025 NFL Draft. It will be on the Locked On NFL Scouting YouTube channel. Myself, Kyle Krabs, we are going to go pick by pick, give you our live reaction and analysis on everything that happens on night 1. So make sure you are subscribed to the Locked On NFL Scouting YouTube channel. We'll be live over there. Kyle and I have done a live draft stream, I think, every year for a long time. And so that's not going to change this year. And that's always fun. Both Kyle and I are very authentic people that don't hide our emotions well. So, whether it's the Bills pick or, of course, Kyle's the Dolphins guy, the Dolphins pick, or even just the surprises along the way, it'll be a lot of fun as we talk you through it. So come on and join us for that. Again, 8 Eastern time, live on the Locked On NFL Scouting YouTube channel. All right, so let's talk a little bit more day 2, and obviously what happens in day 1 affects that. I would love for the Bills to get these answers that I'm looking for at D tackle and D end and a corner. Obviously, we're thinking a lot about trading up. Beane's got 10 picks. I don't know that the Bills can roster 10 rookies, probably 7 or 8, maybe at the most, maybe ideally 6 or 7. So you're thinking trades up are probably going to happen. And I think, per usual, his trade chips are going to be those 4th-round picks. He's got 109, he's got 132 in the 4th round. And whether that's moving up from 56 or 62, packaging 109 or 132 to move up and get specific players, earlier in the 2nd round, or you stick and pick at 56 and 62, and then you package 109 and 132 to get into the 3rd round. Brandon Beane has never not picked in the 3rd round. In fact, the previous 2 times that he didn't have a 3rd round pick, he replenished it in the draft. Last year it happened. The Bills went into the draft without a 3rd round pick, and they traded back in the trade with KC, and they got the 3rd round pick that they used on Dwayne Carter. When the Bills entered the draft, I think it was 2019, they didn't have a 1st round. They didn't have it might have been 2018. It's either 2018 or 2019. They didn't have a 3rd round pick because they traded it for Kelvin Benjamin. They did have 2 4th round picks, and they traded them both to move into the 3rd round for Dawson Knox. Brandon Beane has never not picked in the 3rd round, and in fact, he's only picked in the 4th round, I think, 3 out of 7 drafts. So I'm expecting those 2 picks, 109 and 132, to be his trade chips. All right, let's talk about this day 3 checklist that I have for Brandon Beane. He's not going to trade all of his day 3 picks. The Bills will still pick, I guess, anywhere from 4 to 6 players on day 3. This is my checklist, things that I like for Brandon Beane to get done on day 3. First of all, tight end 3. I keep talking about this, but behind Kincaid and Knox, the Bills only have Zach Davidson. And I know Zach Davidson's a fun training camp player and preseason story. Guy's about to enter his 5th NFL season, and he has not proven anything. I think the Bills need to draft a tight end 3 that they plan on rostering. 2 names that I love, Thomas Fedone, Nebraska, Mitchell Evans, Notre Dame. I also like the UCLA tight end, whose name I'm not going to pronounce correctly, but the UCLA tight end. Those 3 players. I think they need to get speed at receiver. Draft somebody that you intend to be wide receiver 5 that gives you vertical field stretching ability, but also special teams upside. Special teams upside could mean your ability to cover kicks and punts, or it could be your return upside, because I think the Bills would love to get a receiver that also serves as their primary returner. That way they can move on from Brandon Codrington, who is literally only a punt returner. Can't play a lick of corner, doesn't cover kicks and punts. Really, towards the end of the year, they were using Ray Davis and Ty Johnson as kick returners. There's not enough value out of Brandon Codrington outside of just punt return. He's a good punt returner, but you got to do more. Linebacker depth. I love for Brandon Beane to find a linebacker on day 3 that can push Balin Spector off this roster, but then also give you a little upside, because if this is Matt Milano's last year in Buffalo and Dorian Williams is the plan for 2026, I'm fine with that. But you at least need competition for Dorian Williams in 2026, and you need someone to be Dorian Williams, who's had to play a lot for this defense. So that's on my list of things. I also want to see a defensive tackle double dip. I want a top 2 round pick on a D tackle, and I think they need to get another one. Really fill out this defensive tackle group. It's a strong year to do it. There's a lot of players that are interesting that are going to be available on day 3. Double dip. Draft 2 defensive tackles. I'd like for the Bills to draft an interior offensive lineman, and here's how I would attack that. I would say Aaron Kromer. Who do you want? And Kromer's certainly been doing a lot of work on these offensive linemen, but it's getting ahead of needs. Connor McGovern, David Edwards, both expiring contracts. Osiris Torrance is going to be extension eligible after the season. He's going to be very expensive. I think the Bills have some exciting developmental depth on the interior in Alec Anderson, in Tylen Grable. I like him a ton. In Cedric Van Prang-Ranger. But if even if one of those has to become a starter, you still need more depth. You kind of want to replenish there. So let's get an interior offensive lineman with some developmental starter upside. And then a punter. I know the Bills have Jake Camarda. I know they have Brad Robbins. But those options were not very good last year. Jake Camarda, after being a 4th round pick, 2 decent years as the Bucs punter, and then he's like four games into 2024, they cut him for performance. And then Jake Camarda didn't punt for anyone else the rest of the year. Brad Robbins was the Bengals punter in 2023. He was the worst punter in the NFL in 2023. I actually had a tweet during the season last year where I said the biggest positional upgrade for any team was the Bengals going from Brad Robbins to Sam Reckow last year. And so Robbins got cut after the Bengals drafted him the year prior. He didn't get any opportunities. These are the 2 options the Bills have at punter. Now, are they talented and could potentially be an answer? And have you seen punters like not work out originally and then they figure it out? Like, that does happen. And I'm not saying it can't, but that also doesn't stop me from looking at some of these punters this year. And if you like one, bring them in and cut Robbins and have a competition between Camarda and a draft pick. So that's my day 3 checklist for Beane. Tight end 3, speed at receiver. That also helps on special teams, linebacker depth, double dip at defensive tackle, interior offensive lineman, and punter. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today. Remember, Bills Squad live, noon Eastern time on YouTube, Locked On Bills channel. Myself, Jeremy White, Jerry Ostrowski, going to share all the final thoughts that we have. We're going to dive into a lot of fun discussions about this draft. And then we got content all weekend long. It's draft weekend. I'm not going to sit around and not put content out. I promise you that. So you're going to get regular podcasts. So, of course, Friday, I will react to day 1 of the draft. On Saturday morning, you'll get a Friday day 2 reaction. And then after day 3 is done, you'll get as many podcasts as necessary to cover all the Bills picks. So podcasts all weekend long for you to make sure you get all my thoughts on what happens with the Bills in this draft. And then next week, I've got got a fun week planned as we start to really look at this from a high level. What does this draft tell us about the future of the Bills? And of course, the annual Joe Marino and Bruce Nolan versus Brandon Beane, what we would have done in the draft. That's queued up for next week as well. So much content. Don't miss it. Check out the Substack. We got so much going on there. I'm going to be doing film breakdowns on every player of the Bills draft in the Substack. So if you want to check that out, there's a link in today's show notes where my big board is housed, my horizontal board for the Bills. So much going on. So check out the show notes to be part of all of that. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.